Good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining. My name is Wendy Bonneau. I'm with Friesen Nichols. I'm super excited to be here. I've had the pleasure of working with Longview for at least the last decade on some previous planning projects, and it's exciting to be here tonight to be able to present where we are on this particular project. And thank you for joining and showing your attention. It's awesome to see our mayor and so many of our council folks here. So that's great to be able to see. So I've got a team of folks from Friesen Nichols. Shoba and Karen are probably around here working somewhere, and will be. We've got several others that have been a part of this plan that have worked on various things for you. So it takes an army to do good stuff, and so appreciate all of my team as well for their help on this. So tonight we're going to go through a little bit of an introduction. How many of you have been a part of a comp plan before? Comprehensive plan? I see a few. I know there's a few that have been involved. How many have not? Okay, good. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate that. So we'll go through a little bit of an overview of what is a comprehensive plan, why it matters to the city, a little bit of our process and what we've been working on the last year. We're going to highlight some high-level things tonight, and I've also got some information on a website where if you want to read the entire document, you can look through all of the information. I'll explain what some of these are because these are some of the detailed strategies, but there's a lot of things that get us to this point that we're going to go through. So we'll have a little bit of an input activity at the end of this, so be able to give your input, and then we'll wish everybody a good night, and then we will be bringing this back to council here very shortly once we get all the comments. So just a quick intro to comprehensive planning. You know, one of the things that the Texas Local Government Code allows us to do is to set in place a long-range plan and also our zoning and subdivision. It's one of the things that we have in Texas. Comprehensive plans are a long-range document, and they help inform our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance. The main priorities that it focuses on is health, safety, and welfare of our city. So it is a long-range plan. We look about 20 years out, but typically cities update their comprehensive plan every 5 to 10 years, 5 years if they're a fast-growing city, maybe 10 years. The last time that this plan was done was 2015, so you are getting closer right at 9 years. So kudos to you all for updating this and really pushing this forward. It's important to do, and so what that does is it helps us guide future land use decisions. It's what helps us base our zoning. The comprehensive plan is not zoning. You'll see a map back there that is our future land use plan. That is different from a zoning map, but it helps inform that. So if we're going to make a zoning change, for example, or we're going to build new property, we'll look at what the future land use tells us and what are some of the desired uses and desired land use for that. So it's not a rigid policy. It will change. There are things that change it, but it is certainly something that we want to follow. And we want our council and our decision makers to be able to look at that plan and see if it's in keeping with what the plan says. So what's important about this is it really is a community document that reflects what you all feel. We take a lot of community input when we do these. We also look at our city officials, our city departments and what their needs are. And then we had a comprehensive plan advisory committee that has also been working with us. So we take all the different comments, the feedback, even the feedback that we'll hear from you tonight, and put those all together to come into a report. And then, like I said, that helps inform what are follow-up studies that we may need to do? What are changes that we need to make? You did a unified development code that forces a lot of your development. And so those are all things that have come out of this plan and why it's important. So as I mentioned, I had the pleasure of working with the City of Longview back in 2014, 10 years ago when we did this plan in 2015. At that time, it was a very comprehensive plan. We had a lot of input into that. We came up with strategies, and at the very end of that document, again, I have it here, I think it's on your website now, there were some key strategies that came out of that. And you may not be able to read all the content on this, but if you can look to the far right column, there's a little green check mark. Those are all things that have been accomplished since the last plan. So for example, the last comprehensive plan said we really need a downtown plan. Downtown is a real thriving area, and we want to be able to do something with that. That was actually done. That was one of the implementation items. Looking at a policy of dilapidated buildings and how do we tear those down and reuse those or look at that land. That's a policy that the city put into place after this. The fire station, that was one of the things as we grew, we needed to look at our fire stations that were woefully under at the time, and so that's something that the city has accomplished. There's other things on here. We actually did a small area plan for I-20 in the downtown area, and really all of South Longview. That was a big initiative that we did at that plan, and there's a lot of things. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's a lot of things that have been accomplished from that. In fact, today, after our meeting, we drove around and we saw the intersection at High and Mobberly that have been done, and the gateways that have been done. And y'all, I know y'all don't see it today, but there's a streetscape that's going to be coming up on Mobberly. It's in design. That's fantastic. That is a specific action that came out of those plans. So those are the types of things that we look at. Again, there was a refresh of the code, Lear Park Master Plan. I mean, there's been a lot. This is a continued list of things that were done. So when you look at these boards at the end of the night, and again, I'll explain what all that is, and you think about strategies, your input and your support of those things is what helps get things accomplished. It's really what helps us be able to bring things forward. So kudos to the city. You've done a lot, and that's what I think the reason we're refreshing this is because a lot of the items in those top strategies from the last plan have been accomplished, and so kudos to you all. So when we started this particular update, we started that about a year ago, and we did a couple of things. Number one, we had a comprehensive plan advisory committee, and I know we have a couple of those members here tonight. And I really appreciate them because these are folks that we've met with several times throughout this process. We met with them earlier today for several hours looking at all of these different strategies. They gave us comments because they represented a lot of the different community and council members had different folks appointed to that were able to give us feedback. So really appreciate their attendance and being able to plug into this. About this time last year, we were right here in this room kicking off this plan. We had a great attendance from the public. We had about 100 people from the public giving us input during that. So that was fantastic. And then even following that, we had a survey. We had about another 77 people that filled out that survey and gave us input from that. So some of the key just takeaways that we heard often, quite a bit in those first plans, was that number one, residents in Longview love the small town feel here. I mean, a lot of people have a real sense of pride and like this community and have lived here for a long time, and so that was great to see. Thinking about more mixed use and creating walkability, it's been really cool, at least from my vantage point, to be able to see some of the great things that downtown Longview has done that really is kind of the heart of your city, and so that's been really neat to see, and so we heard some good things about that. We did hear desire for more entertainment options. One of the things that we heard a lot was, we've got some young folks, we've got some of our schools, we got school districts, and we have our colleges, and we have people here, but then sometimes they move off and they're not coming back. So there's an age group of folks that are kind of missing, and so what are those entertainment options that we can have in the city that attract young families and want them, have them stay here when they graduate? There's a strong focus on local business retention. there's a lot of retail and a lot of businesses in Longview, and I know you all wish there were a lot more. We'd love to see some of these businesses filled, and so there was a real retention on being able to keep our businesses here. And then just some different variety types. You'll see it termed here as missing middle. In the past, we've looked a lot at housing, and we see a lot of single family, and then people seem to think there's single family and there's apartments, and those are kind of the two ends of the thing. But there's a wide range of housing in between that we're sometimes missing, and so that's one of the things that we heard from those meetings. So from the survey, we heard similar things. I think one of the things that stood out that was a little bit different was just strong desire for high-paying jobs, to get more jobs here in Longview to keep people, desire to address homeless population, and looking at continuing our beautification efforts along I-20 corridor. That was one of the things, again, that we heard from that plan. We really want to be able to continue that. So let me talk a little bit about just the plan highlights and the way it's organized. So in the last plan, there were, I think, 11 chapters, but we've consolidated this down to really focus on livability and land use. And the reason for that is because there's been various other initiatives and plans that have been taking place over the last several years to address some of the other things. For example, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan has been updated, and so it addresses a lot of our transportation things. You just finished updating your parks plan that looked at parks and open space, and that had a lot of input as well, and projects in there and prioritization, so y'all just went through that. We did have an annexation policy in the last plan, but the state law has reduced the ability to annex involuntarily, and so we have removed that section because it no longer applies to some of the things that we were looking at. And then for economic development, this is something that LeadCo has been focused on. They've recently updated their strategic plan. So my point of saying that is if you were to compare it and you didn't see some of those chapters, it's not because they are not important, it is just because they're being addressed in other plans. So really what tonight we're doing is we're focusing on the land use and livability, which is how do we use our land and what's going to make us a livable city that we want people to come and stay here. So the plan chapters itself, if you look at the plan, again, I'll give you some QR codes, and you might have already seen something like this. It's going to have the draft plan on it. There's a community snapshot chapter. There's vision, goals, and objectives chapter. There's a future land use chapter, which our map is back here, and we can talk more about that and show you that. There's a neighborhood and livability chapter, and then there's implementation. So I'm just going to kind of give you a snapshot of what's in the plan and go through some of those things. So what you'll see up here on the screen is just population projections. If you're not used to looking at graphs like this, I'll explain to you a little bit about what it is. It's a pyramid. It starts at birth up to 85 and older. And so we kind of look at this and we compare what's in the blue shaded parts is Longview, and what's in the black dashed line is the state of Texas. So we kind of look at how does Longview compare to the state of Texas. And without getting into all the details and knowing this, some of the key takeaways in this is your current population is about 83,000. And when we look at your growth rate over time, it's only about 0.5%. It's flattened out a little bit in the last several years. We've seen a little bit of a spike in the last year, but that's one of those things that we really want to look at in terms of population. How are we bringing more people here? Because we look at that, and when we think about all the things that we want to see, we got to have something to be able to support that, right? And so we want to be able to have growth, to have tax dollars, to have sales tax dollars, to be able to fund all the fun things that we want. So that's one of the things that stood out to us in just looking at your population. Another thing is that Longview's lacking some of that prime workforce age. When you look at it, you've got some younger, like 30, 34 and below, we've got a good population there, and 60 and older, we've got a good population. But where you're smaller than the kind of the state average is in between that 30 to 55 age. So again, that prime kind of workforce age. And so that's one of the things that we look at when we think about this is, how do we bring, new jobs here? Do we have adequate housing? Do we have the quality of life that we need to be able to bring people here? We also look at, again, I won't go into all the details of this, but we look a lot at just housing values and how that's changed. We heard a lot about affordable housing, and honestly, you're not unlike any city pretty much in Texas and almost in the U.S. right now of just affordable housing. Everything's getting a little bit more expensive, so there's definitely a shift towards that. I don't think you're out of the norm when we look at others, but I know that that's always an issue. The vision statement of the last plan is one of the things that we started with when we did this. This was what was done in 2014 plan. So we asked at the first meeting, in our first CPAC meeting, is this still a relevant vision statement? And we got a resounding yes on this. We still feel like this is a great vision statement for you. There is a lot packed in to this vision statement. There's a lot of things, but one of the things that I really thought was great from what Longview has done compared to other cities is each of these words were really broken down and looking at, how do we become a premier community? How do we promote education? How do we create business opportunities? So it wasn't just fluff verbiage, it was really what set the stage for the entire plan. So this vision statement is then broken down, and each of those key words is created a goal, and then there's created strategies around that. So again, safe, welcoming environment. Take any of these, there's strategies created around how do we do that, which I think is really, really cool. Again, I've used you all as examples for other cities because I really thought that was a meaty, it's a lot packed into it, but it was a meaty way of the way this whole comprehensive plan is set up. So each of those goals has a goal as each of those words within the vision statement has a goal, and then it also has specific objectives, and then it has strategies. So that's how the whole plan is organized, and that's kind of important to keep in mind. So without going through, what you're going to see over here is those goals, those strategies, and then those objectives on all of these boards. You're going to see that. So this would take up, I think, about 15 slides because we went through all the detail this morning with CPAC, but I want y'all all to be able to see the goal, to be recognized as the most livable city in East Texas, to have quality collaboration of education and highest educational attainment, to foster a strong and diverse economy that is a full range of employment, to promote a community that encourages cross-cultural understanding, nurturing, respect, and celebration, to build off of Longview's historical significance and heritage. You've got a great heritage, and we want to be able to honor that. You've got natural beauty that not every city has, and so being able to preserve that. Focusing on families, again, there's very specific objectives in here to be able to create something where all people can live here, from young to old and everything in between, that we can encourage people to stay and be engaged in a family-friendly atmosphere. That's a thing that we've heard a lot here. Providing healthy choices for Longview citizens. A lot of that has to do with some of our parks and trails, but even more than that. Creating a safe environment with adequate facilities to maintain safety for residents, visitors, and workers, to strengthen Longview's image, identity, and character, and making this an appealing place to live. I was driving some of my colleagues around today, and here's one of my observations. I've said this before, and I think it still stands true today. Longview has some beautiful areas and some really, really cool things. I mean, one of them's right outside this door in the Arboretum. There's some really, really neat areas here, but sometimes if you're just driving along the corridors, like, you don't see how cool this city is, because there are some things that we need to do on the corridors, and so, I think that's still true today. I think there's been a lot of improvements, but there's still areas for us to improve. Looking at areas to designate as mixed use that attract all people. We've got a changing environment now, and I don't know that, some people, we tend to change what we dress after 10 years, right? Or we change the decor in our house after so many years because there's preferences. And so again, going back to that housing choice, some people choose and want to live in a place that is higher density. I, for one, live in a townhome. I absolutely love it. My kids are out of school. I don't want to take care of a yard anymore. I don't want to take care of that. I want to be in a walkable environment. So just recognizing that age to be able to catch people here, we want to be able to do that and look for those places to be able to do that. And then just creating a community that instills passion and pride and love of its city. So those are some of the goals, and that's why that vision statement is so important. So I mentioned some of the things that we've heard. So over here on the left are some of the bullets and some of the things that we heard, and then over on the right is how we address that in the plan. So each of the things that we heard, we tried to look at the plan itself and how do we change that, or maybe add a goal or reword something to be able to update that in modern language today. So I keep mentioning the housing diversity, because I do think that that's one of the things that we probably heard one of the loudest, is being able to have housing diversity. And so one of the things that we looked at on the land use plan is how to create a combined neighborhood residential category. And be able to give you more flexibility. Now, if somebody's coming in and building something, they're still going to come to the city and it's going to look at the zoning, but still being able, from a land use perspective, to allow more flexibility. And, in some cases, modest density. I don't mean high density. That's a whole different category. But some modest density to be able to come in with some townhomes or zero lot line homes or creative products that not only give people more variety, but also can help attain the affordability issue, because we know that big single-family neighborhoods and that kind of thing are more expensive. That's one of the things that we heard. So that's one of the things that this plan addresses, looking at all of the different housing types. We have a recommendation in here to really talk with developers on how do we streamline the Unified Development Code. That is a whole thing that was done several years ago, and for many reasons it's been great, but we always want to kind of continuously improve and see if there are any barriers within the UDC, or things that we need to streamline in terms of process and that kind of thing. So that's one of the recommendations to things that we need to look at. It came up, I'll give you an example of something that came up today. We want to be able to create affordable product, right? But at the same time, we heard from the last plan that we need better maintenance standards. We need sidewalks. That's one of the things that we heard a lot, was sidewalks. And so that was one of the things that was put in the code back when it was updated, was to put in sidewalks. Well, then we kind of hear, well, that costs developers more. And guess who pays for that cost, right? If it costs a developer more, then they're going to charge you more rent, and it's going to be more. So finding that balance between those things are sometimes tricky, because we heard a lot about we want more walkability, but then we heard more about affordability. And so balancing that and really picking the things that you want to be able to create walkability and put sidewalks. But I'll tell you, y'all got miles and miles and miles of roads in this city. I mean, you have a lot of roads, and so to be able to put sidewalks everywhere is probably impractical. So anyway, that's just an example of something that came up that maybe we look at, okay, maybe it's not a wholesale, go build sidewalks everywhere, but let's really pick the key activity areas and key points that we really want to connect. And so those are some of the things, and then just look at, again, periodic goals for housing production and those types of things. So those are some of the ways that we've addressed that. I mentioned earlier some of the other things that we heard related to entertainment options. How do we keep people here? How do we make more business-friendly environments? And so we did add some specific recommendations in the plan to be able to really look at those entertainment venues and thinking about those recreational amenities, to look at arts and entertainment and those types of things that we want to be able to look. Again, some of that is a use of a business, but those still, when we're making decisions for land uses, or LeadCo is out recruiting or trying to bring in, those are key things that we want to be able to know. And so partnering with LeadCo on those regional attractions is something that's in the plan. I mentioned the local business retention, some of the things that we heard to be able to keep our small businesses here. And so we do have some tweaks in the plan related to incentive policies, or retaining, really focusing on targeting areas, business recruitment, and so on. And again, LeadCo's doing some of that, but those are some of the things that we've added in here. We've looked at preserving the employment areas, preserving some land along different areas. I mean, really trying to stay true to that land use plan, because there's reasons for that. There's reasons for where we want to concentrate some of our land uses and preserve some different areas to be able to allow those jobs to come in. So I mentioned some of the land. Again, the land use plan is back there in the back, and so we can talk about some of the detail. But we looked at the future residential, non-residential, the open space. We want to maintain our environmentally sensitive areas and keep those there. Really want to kind of look at future land uses along those major corridors. And then already mentioned the zoning map and how that's different. So next thing is neighborhood and community livability. So we continue to hear some of the feedback of wanting to beautify the corridors that we have. And again, city is making strides towards that. I know that there's already several of them underway. Again, I mentioned Mobberly today. That's one I know that I'm intimately familiar with that is going to be going under construction. And so just looking at how we do that along our corridors and continuing to beautify those are some important components that you're going to see in some of these strategies. So then the very last piece of the plan is the implementation table. So there's a lot of text around each of these different things and the why and why these are important. But this is really where the rubber meets the road of all these specific strategies of what you want to see, because those become the action items. And so what you see here, let me kind of point your attention to the board for just a moment. The last two back in that corner are for the land use plan, and it describes what those colors are. If you're not used to looking at a land use plan, then there's a board back there that will help describe what those colors are. So we'll have somebody back there in case you want to know, okay, what is this area and what is the desired land use? We can explain what those are. The three boards next to it that look like what you see up here on the screen are specific strategies related to future land use plan. So those are things like looking at the mixed use areas, encouraging retail uses and those types of things. So those are specific strategies that you'll see on those three boards. Then the next one over here is livability. This one talks about gateways and some of the things that I know we're trying to achieve with corridors. And then all the purple boards here relate to livability. It's what's going to help make Longview a more attractive place to live. And a lot of that has to do with quality of life. So you'll see that on these boards here. I'll point out just in talking to the committee today, and we went through a whole prioritization exercise. I'll tell you a little bit of some of the things that were important to them. It doesn't matter. I don't want that to influence you, because I want you to be able to tell us what's important to you, okay? That's why we're here tonight. But some of the things that came out is those mixed-use developments. How do we create kind of something different with housing and residential incorporated, looking at just a different type of, space on our land use plan. We have a recommendation in here for the continuing revitalization of South Longview. Again, I will applaud the city. So one of the recommendations after the last plan was to do a small area plan for I-20 and coming up, and then a second one for downtown. And so some of the things that have been done, we, what's the road that came through right at the intersection at High and Mobberly, and we fixed that road, and then we also took that road back a little bit to connect into the neighborhood. I've gone blank on what the name of the road is, but okay, well, Estes and High, and then there was another little connection. But anyway, the whole idea was be able to kind of connect that neighborhood again. The monument that's out there at that intersection, again, you're about to see a great streetscape, a complete street that's going to be done on Mobberly up to downtown. So there's been a lot of things that we've done, but we recognize there's always more to do. So that was one of the things that came out of that. Just supporting the downtown plan, area plan. That was another thing. It's done, and there's been a lot of things done in that plan, but there's still more to do. So continuing the implementation of that. As it relates to neighborhoods, some of the things that the committee prioritized today was higher education programs and really that collaboration. We recognize that's an important thing. I mentioned the homeless population and really trying to partner, leverage the partnerships that we can for that. I talked about streamlining some of the potential barriers for housing affordability and range of residential choices, adaptive reuse for our downtown buildings. And let's see, I think there's maybe one more of the things that they prioritized earlier today. Yeah. Rehabilitate and reuse historically significant older properties was one of the things, and then partnering with LEEDCO on regional entities and to attract and develop unique restaurants and entertainment. So a lot of those are things that we heard. It's kind of ironic because I don't think we tried to influence that today, and yet we still got a lot of feedback on some of the things that were really important. There's a few other things that came out today that you're not going to see on these boards because I mentioned they're addressed in other plans. But like transportation, for example, was one of the things that we talked a little bit about that, and this need for sidewalks, but how do we be strategic about that? Because maybe it's not practical to have sidewalks everywhere and to have gaps, but we recognize that's a really important thing. The public transportation system, I learned something new today. Do you know that if a bus comes by, all you got to do is raise your hand and the bus will stop? I had no idea, because they mentioned today that, well, we need to do something about bus stops and having the buses easier to get to. I had no idea, but y'all have what is it called, Held a Ride? So all you got to do is try to stop that bus, and so you don't have to necessarily go to a bus stop to be able to get on a bus. I had no idea, but I think that's a really cool thing because a lot of cities don't have that, so kudos to you all. We talked a little bit about streetscape and urban design standards and really trying to look at our streetscapes, making things pedestrian friendly, potential convention space, or are there other types of event spaces that we could have? And then, like I mentioned, continuing to try to look for ways to use underutilized buildings or distressed properties to continue that need. And then, you've got a recent parks plan that was adopted, so looking at how we fund that, particularly playground equipment for special needs. That was one of the things that came up as a as a preferred alternative or priority for some of the parks plans. So those are some of the other things that are captured in here, and it's basically pulling those other plans together, and you'll see those in the implementation plan. So with that, let me just kind of go over this and what you have the opportunity to do tonight. I don't know if you got any of these cards, but if you don't, we can certainly get you some. We have a website that has some of these documents on there. It will have the draft plan on there. We got some. We presented it again to our CPAC today. So we'll be updating the new version of that. If there's any other input that you have that you want to be able to give us feedback on, please go to that. You can go to this scan, or you can look at these cards here. Our next step is to be able to get feedback from what we hear tonight, take the feedback that we heard from our CPAC today. We'll be incorporating that, but I think we're really close. We're about on the 90-yard, or getting close to the end of the, and getting over the goal line. We'll be coming to planning and zoning here soon. I don't know that we exactly have that date set, but I think hopefully in the next month we'll be coming to council for that. So I think we've got a tentative date in August for that. So tonight, what we would love to hear, if you have any comments for anything, myself and, like I said, Shoba and Karen, we're here to take comments. We would love to get your thoughts on these strategies, because those are, again, those action items that staff and council can take forward. So we would love to see your feedback. So we've got Post-it notes on the bottom. We've got markers. So if you see a strategy that you really like, and I love this, put a check mark, say yes, say, really want to see this. If you see something that you don't think is important, or perhaps it needs to be edited or changed, give us your feedback on that. You're welcome to write whatever you want on a sticky note, and you can stick it up next to these and give us your feedback on any of those. If you see anything that you want to talk more about, we'll be able to answer questions. And so we've got all of these here, and then down at the land use plan again, if you have any particular comments on that. So that's what really our assignment is tonight before we leave. We'd love to get your feedback on that. And then I just really wanted to say, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here. Thanks for giving us feedback and listening. Hope you learned something about your plan tonight. And we'll be happy to take any questions or feedback. So if y'all want to come over to the board, we'll be over there. If you don't have any additional input and we answered your questions, then we could be adjourned for the night. So thank you all very much for being here.